Hello, hello, hello. Welcome again to another episode of the Self-Intimacy Journey. We are still going through our financial literacy series, and today we'll be discussing the game plan with Mark Holohan. In episode 1, we talk about financial independence, its importance, and the process of getting there. In this episode, we'll talk with Mark Holohan about developing the game plan.
Thanks, Charlene. In our last episode, we talked about the financial planning process, starting with the assessment of your current financial position. In this episode, we will discuss goal setting and spend some time on determining retirement and emergency savings goals.
Can you please define a goal for us?
A goal is a specific desired outcome to achieve by a specific date. Think of the acronym SMART, S-M-A-R-T, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timed. If you say, I want to have $1 million in savings, that is not a goal, even though it is specific and measurable, because it is definitely not timed. That makes it only a dream. A better example would be to accumulate $1 million in a retirement account by January 1st, 2060. At first glance, this appears to comply with all the SMART elements, except possibly the attainable aspect. You need to develop a plan to assess whether a goal is attainable. You may have to adjust your goals after you figure out what it would take to achieve them, especially when there are several goals competing for funding.
So, why is it important to set goals?
Financial independence and security doesn't happen by accident. People who are successful in life decide what they want and make a deliberate plan in the effort to get there. Would you take off on a vacation without an idea of where you would like to go? Wouldn't it be better to get reservations for transportation and lodging? Goal setting is similar for achieving financial success as well as other aspects of your life that are important.
That's interesting because usually when I go on my trips, I don't like to plan. I will plan to some extent, but I don't really plan to the T's because I also want to have I want to be subject to the unknown, enjoy what life has to offer. But then from your example, is showing that yes, you might need to adjust and you might need to plan ahead of that, even though as your character or as your way of doing, you've been doing impromptu or you've been open to whatever comes. But if you want to have financial freedom, you might need to change that mindset and you might need to plan to the T so that you know where you are, you know where you want to go so that you can start taking steps to get you from where you are to where you want to go.
Exactly. And these plans can change as life changes. Certainly, retirement goals can change by getting married or getting divorced or getting promotions or many other changes in our lives can change the trajectory we are on toward financial independence goal.
That's a great one. So have room from the unknown, but still set it so that, but you also want to be able to leave room so that you can adapt to the different changes in your life.
Right. This isn't set and forget.
Yes.
It's set and reassess.
Yep, that's a good point. So, what are some typical financial goals people should set?
Well, remember during the last episode when we contrasted signs of people who are in financial dire straits versus on a healthy trajectory to financial independence?
Yep.
You should address fixing those signs that are not so good. Some basic financial goals typically cover debt reduction, emergency savings, and retirement savings. But others could include saving for the down payment for purchasing a house or for funding a child's higher education. You could set goals for funding a vacation or a car purchase. There are many possible goals, but they compete for funding. So you have to prioritize them. Over half of American households don't have emergency savings. So that needs much more attention. Many do not save enough for retirement and face a drastic drop in spending in their senior years. Being saddled with high interest debt holds back progress on wealth building as repayment money is diverted from building emergency and retirement savings.
Hmm. How big should emergency savings be?
Most advisors recommend savings equivalent to 3 to 6 months of living expenses. A key consideration is the length of time it would take to find a new job if you were laid off. Higher paying jobs typically take longer to find. Remember that if you are laid off, it's possible that lenders may find that out and they could decide to shrink the amount of funds you borrow. Other emergencies can include things like large home repairs or car repairs or medical bills not covered by insurance. Some of this last group of events may be covered by loans if they happen before you accumulate a good enough level of emergency savings, but that means your debt situation gets worse. We will talk about how insurance can help with certain emergencies in another episode. Building a cushion to keep you from becoming homeless is vital to your well being.
It's a good point you mentioned because now that we're seeing after COVID and everything, that I believe, if I'm right, that it takes longer for you to find a job right nowadays. So let's say if you were to save for 3 to 6 months with the actual economy and the actual way the job industry is working, you might not have enough. So maybe it's a better idea to save for a year, let's say, if you can do so. And the other point that I wanted to mention is sometimes you might say, oh, if I get laid off, if you work for a great organization, you might say that I'm going to get a severance plan, right? I will get money for a period of time.
Well, that could happen, but it's hard to count on that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. What if it doesn't happen? Or what if like you only get 2 months and you don't get a job within that time frame? So even though you're counting on that severance plan, you still want to save for emergency for a longer period of time. I say like plan for 6 months, but your goal should be 12, right? So just in case it takes longer, or and even as you're looking for a job, you might have emergency. Let's say if you have a house, you might have to, but I don't know, Mark, if you separate those, let's say you have to buy a new roof or something, are you taking that away from that emergency fund, or how would that work? So because you're thinking, okay, I'm out of a job for maybe 6 months. I'm saving for 6 months, but if you have big item tickets, where would that money come from? Or is it gonna impact your
Right.
pool?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And we should also remember that if you're doing this right, you're accumulating retirement savings, emergency savings, and of course, in a case of a roof, that means you have a home if you have to pay for the roof, and some equity there. And so the interplay between where you get that money for an emergency, you may have more options than just our simple example of having a
Okay.
specific emergency fund. Obviously, it's not a great thing to rob retirement funds, but you may have to do that, especially while you're trying to build both retirement and emergency savings funds at the same time. That's another possibility if something bad happens before you get to your emergency savings goals. Roofers may have financing plans, or maybe you can take out a home equity credit line to finance a roof repair, and that might be a very low interest rate to be more attractive than stopping what you're doing on the savings front. There's a number of these things to look at. If your air conditioner goes out, there's oftentimes a lending plan, but it's usually at credit card high type interest rates. So there's complexity here, but we're just trying to at least get started here with some simple ideas to help people realize that these are all important areas of their planning process.
Great, thank you. And one thing that I want to share, one thing that I'm learning to do because I haven't mastered it yet, is like even in my saving, like you have a budget for uh your main expenses, you have a budget for vacation, a budget for whatever. So I'm trying to also do the same in my savings. Have like particular tiers for my savings. Let's say I have savings for emergency if I get out of a job, or I have a saving for uh, expensive, urgent expenses like a roof and stuff. Even if I have insurance, maybe there's a deductible that I need to cover. So I will put that aside. I have savings for such and such. So you see, I will go through my lifestyle to what I need. And the same way I'm budgeting, I would also do the same for my savings, and I will separate them in different accounts. And nowadays in your bank accounts, you can create different portfolios. So you can separate them and make sure that you know using that, and then you have that accounted for. And then you can have like a miscellaneous saving that you can move around if you need to, but make sure that to replace. I think that's also a great way to learn how to navigate what would be appropriate for your specific scenario until you find what is really beneficial for your journey. Like Mike said, we are giving you examples, but you might have to play around with what we are giving and adapting it to your particular journey, to your particular situation, and find the winning situation for you.
That's true, and we'll be talking about different things and options you can do with the money you're putting aside for savings, and they have different percentages of earnings or savings. Many people struggle with credit card debt, and that could be 20% that they earn by paying that down. And if you're creating an emergency savings account, you're putting money into another account that may not earn 20%, which you could be using to reduce your credit card debt. And so there's some trade-offs that people have to decide on. If you pay your credit card down, you may be able to borrow against it for an emergency, but not always, especially if your credit card gets canceled or limited. If you lose a job, that doesn't necessarily happen, but it's possible. So these are things of an overall financial picture to try to balance and see what works best for you as an individual in your situation.
Perfect. And what is a great example of a retirement goal?
Well, when they survey Americans, many people say they want to retire at age 62 with the ability to replace 80% of their pre-retirement income. And that allows them to spend effectively the same amount as when they worked, assuming that they were saving 10% of their income for retirement when they were working. And also, they no longer have earnings that are subject to the payroll taxes we pay for wages, which are 7.6% after taxes, which would mean that could be 10% before taxes. Also, when you're retired, Social Security income is taxed at discounted rates from anywhere from 15 to 100% discounts compared to earned income. So that's a help as well. And that applies to earned income on both the federal tax side and by many states as well. There are disadvantages to retiring at 62. There is a potential issue with affording health insurance coverage without an employer's help when retiring at 62 until you become eligible for Medicare at age 65, which is the preferred health insurance program for seniors that is partially paid for by people who are working. Also, your Social Security benefits will be much lower if you retire and claim them at 62 than later on. Nevertheless, health problems could become more likely to affect the ability to continue working and to fully enjoy retirement the later you set it. It can also be harder to find or keep jobs late in your career for a variety of reasons.
So how does one replace 80% of their pre-retirement income in retirement?
Well, think of a three-legged stool for retirement funding. The first leg is Social Security that provides part of this income. Then a second leg is personal assets like savings, retirement accounts, or properties, and these are converted to spendable income. A third leg, though much less common than it used to be, consists of pension plans or annuities, which typically may be people in government positions or working for schools may have. Having large enough amounts in these three categories to allow you to replace your pre-retirement spendable income while inflation chips away at the purchasing power takes planning, commitment, starting early, and a bit of luck. You can't necessarily count on working late in life to meet your retirement funding, but it could work out if your health is still good.
I'm interested to see what you think because I see that there is a lot of people that would retire and then realize that, let's say, if they're collecting Social Security is not enough, they cannot maintain the lifestyle that they had, or even they cannot even have the basic lifestyle that most people like, meaning having a roof over your head, food on the table and stuff like that, and health and stuff like that. So they have to go back in the workforce. What are your thoughts on that? And what is something, I know we're talking on it, but so that we can really emphasize what can we do to prevent that?
Well, that's exactly why we're talking about this retirement goal setting, because many people do not do retirement planning and they don't realize that Social Security is not enough to maintain their spending in retirement. And so they are surprised. They may not start thinking about it till their 50s or even 60s. And if they don't even look at the numbers enough, they still might be surprised. So that's why it's so important to start early and have some preparations financially for this. Up until the 1980s, many people had pension plans. So between Social Security and pension plans,
Mm,
they could be fine in retirement, but they'd have to stay and work for one company for 30 years or more to do that. So that was replaced with these 401k plans we'll talk about that
mhm,
employers offer. And so they put the onus back on employees to save money for retirement themselves instead of the employer making a promise to provide an income in retirement and having all the risk of what happens to investment returns and inflation and interest rates. It's exactly why we need to talk about this planning process and why people should start early and prepare.
Yeah, that's very important. Or I've seen some people that would also, let's say you work in the US, you get your social security, social security money on a monthly basis, and then you relocate in a third world country where you have more of a buying power. That is also an option. That is also a route, but then you have to also plan for that. You have to know where you have more buying power, which country is safe, where can you go, and think of the tax component as well. But yeah, I just wanted to put it out there.
Well,
So
that's true.
net,
That's true. Many people have a hard time saving money, and we'll see some examples of what it takes to really have a fully funded retirement. And so maybe you decide that you just don't want to do that and that you will just take your chances on Social Security being your only retirement funding source and that you will be committed to leave the United States and find a lower cost place to live and leave your family behind if they don't move with you. So that is another path for your life to consider.
yeah. What are some examples of how retirement funding could work?
Yeah, let's see. Let's take a look at a retirement calculator that can help us see that. If you go to a browser and enter AARP Retirement Nest Egg Calculator. This calculator comes up and it doesn't explicitly cover pensions, so it's a two-legged stool model for Social Security and savings funding. But that's what most people have. If you have a pension, then you just have to consider that in the model or look for a better model that includes pension benefits. Financial planners would have those, of course, and there probably are some on the internet. You can search and find plenty of other retirement calculators. So let's just look at an example. There's some default entries on the AARP site. I'm going to change the starting point to 25 years old because we're helping people start early to plan for retirement. And this is for a single person who has zero in retirement savings. And today they're making $50,000 a year and they want to retire at 65. And so when we run that, um, and I'll cover a few more assumptions in a minute, you could do that and by saving $309 a month for the 40 years, and that would result in having 80% of your income to spend for a 35-year retirement. And so $309 may be quite doable for people. Others may find that pretty hard. A couple of the other assumptions I want to mention, there is a box to check about including Social Security. So don't panic when you see some of the first numbers if you haven't checked that box, which say you need to have very huge amounts of investment for doing it all from savings. I've also changed the pre-retirement earnings to 8% per year instead of 7, because I think that's realistic if you invest properly and listen to our podcast on investing. And then in retirement, you should be able to get 6%. Also, inflation matters. I'm assuming 3% inflation here, though the Federal Reserve would like to see it at 2, but they aren't always successful in keeping it at 2. And then we've also assumed that your earnings will increase by 2% a year, and you could change that if you think that's right. So that results in needing $886,000 for retirement at the age of 65 or 40 years from now. It seems like a very big number, but it only takes $309 a month to do that at the assumptions we've outlined here. So that's
I
our
have a
base.
question for
Sure.
you. So those are if you save in a personal saving account, or is it if you add it to your 401k?
This assumes it's in a retirement account, which would not incur taxes along the way.
Okay.
It's not considering whether you reduce your taxable income in the year you put it in a regular IRA, for instance, or 401k. The other option is a Roth investment, and we'll talk more about that in the investment podcast. This is just strictly putting it in an account that doesn't get taxed along the way.
Got it.
And so let's look at a second example. Suppose you wanted to retire at 65 instead of 62. I'm sorry, 62 instead of 65, 3 years earlier. Well, now it takes a monthly savings starting at $430 a month instead of 309. That's 39% more than it would have just for retiring 3 years earlier. It really shows how much easier it is to fund later retirement dates if you can work longer. And of course, health insurance makes that easier as well because Medicare starts at 65.
What if that is if you have no interruption in your career, right? Let's say if you get out of it, if you are without a job for let's say a year or 2 or 5, how do you catch up?
Yes, I mean that's a great question. Life happens, right? That's why you're having to reassess, and so you'd have to rerun this model with new
Mm,
assumptions when
okay.
life changes for you. You, I mean, many people have had higher returns than we're assuming here because the stock market has had so many great years of performance. So that could be working in your favor. You could buy a house that does surprisingly well in appreciation, which can help you increase your wealth. So things can happen that are helpful, and things that can happen that are hurtful to your financial trajectory. So that's why you have to redo this. You could have promotions at work, and have nice increases in your income. All these things are things that require just reassessing and seeing where you are. And if you save more for retirement, great. If you save less, you may find that you could make that up by working harder, especially for people in their 50s and 60s. When their kids are gone, they may have more ability to increase their savings. You just don't have as much time for it to grow from compound interest. And so
Mm,
that's why we we want you to consider starting early. In fact, let's go to example 3 that shows us just that effect. If we set it back to retirement at 65, like example 1, and now the only thing we change is starting at 35 instead of 25 with zero retirement savings. Now, instead of 309 a month, you have to
mm,
go to 610 a month, which
mm,
is 97% more than if we started at age 25. It really shows the importance of starting early. Compound
mm.
interest matters.
Yeah.
So now let's go back to our original example of retiring at 65 and starting at 25 years old. And now let's suppose that there are 2 people that are contributing to this $50,000 a year income instead of one. And there's going to be 2 Social Security benefits instead of one. Well, now look at this. The savings you need drops to only $139 a month.
Not bad.
Yeah. However, there is one gotcha here. When one person dies, the Social Security income from the lesser benefit will stop, along with the deceased person's expenses, of course. But that is a consideration
Mm,
to realize. But that certainly makes it much easier when there's 2 people contributing to this
yeah.
to get the job done. So now let's look at another example. Let's go back to our initial example for a single person retiring at 65, example 1. And now the starting income is only $25,000 a year. Well, now the savings needed for just one person, instead of being 309, it drops to 92. So
Mm,
even though we're replacing half the income, we only need 30% of the savings amount. And why is that? Well, that's because Social Security benefits have a progressive feature, which is more generous to lower earning people
mm,
as a percentage of what they contributed. And so it's very, very feasible. It can be very feasible for even people in lower income brackets to still meet reasonable retirement goals. But these calculators help. And of course, we're assuming Social Security will continue paying under the rules it has today.
mm.
So let's try
Yeah.
one more example. Okay, let's look at another example. And this is one where a single person makes 80,000 per year. So now the savings rises to $590 a month. And so the income has risen 60% from 50,000 a year, but the savings need is 91% higher due to the progressive benefits that are involved in Social Security. So the greater your pre-retirement income, the more critical your level of savings becomes in replacing that income.
Mm,
Note that the amounts saved for retirement can also be met with employer contributions if you have 401k plans. But remember that employers usually require you to stay for up to 5 years to get the full employer contribution if you leave. So you can use that in your planning, but just be aware that that can set your plans back if you leave early, and consider that in your decision to leave. Plans may offer contributions that could add several percentage points of your pay.
yeah, that's a good point. And what I will say is like if you are working for a company that is matching your contribution, make sure that if they match it at 4%, make sure that you actually save that 4% so that you don't miss on that contribution, because that will be very helpful. And pay attention, like Mike said, to how long you need to stay to be fully vested into that contribution. By fully vested is meaning that the money would become yours. And some would do it in different sections. Let's say if they say 5 years, 5 years, you're 100% vested. But if you stay like for 3 years or so, you might be like 50% vested at 3 years or so. So when you decide to leave the organization, and as you plan for retirement, take that into consideration of what are you living with, or what are you leaving on the table? Are you willing to leave that on the table, or can you wait until you are fully vested before you go to a new organization? But also one point to consider is if you go to another organization, you can also negotiate that in part of your salary. Is that okay? I'm leaving that on the table, but if I come with you, I'm leaving the 30%. Would you be willing to cover the 30% as part of the benefits, as part of an incentive to my salary, so that I don't lose that money? So those are also, you might have to have a tough conversation with your new organization before hire, but you can also negotiate that. If they really want you, they might compromise with you, or they might even give you what you are looking for.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as we talk about balancing several goals, and what do you do with money that you decide you can afford to put aside for these various goals? The employer matching level of 401k contributions is going to give you 50% return for the first year. 50% if you stay long enough to be vested in that. And so if you're facing paying off a credit card at 20%, it's a shame to miss out on the 50% of the
Mhm.
employer contribution just to pay down 20% for a credit card. But if you go beyond that, then your investment returns may be only 10%. Now it may look better to pay down the credit card balance. So those are some of the thinking processes we do, trying to decide how to go from a position of heavy debt and no retirement savings to a position of financial independence.
Yeah. So, can some people do okay in retirement without accumulating large savings amounts?
These examples illustrate quite different retirement scenarios, and they illustrate the importance of looking at your own situation rather than just using a one size fits all approach. And beyond this calculator, there are things like pensions, employer stock programs, appreciated homes with low or no mortgage balances that can make retirement numbers seem workable with low retirement program savings. Also, continuing to work until 70 can result in Social Security benefits 75% greater than if you take them at 62, with a shorter remaining retirement to fund. However, there are two important considerations. Social Security is headed for benefit cuts of around 22% in the 2030s if taxes aren't raised or benefits aren't adjusted, for instance, delaying full retirement age. A second important consideration for retirees is potentially living to a point of needing care in nursing homes, especially for things like dementia that need the highest level of care and that can last for years. Social Security doesn't cover long-term care in general. Individuals who are above the low income limits for indigent care are particularly vulnerable if they have no savings or long-term care insurance coverage. Most people do not want to become a financial burden to their loved ones, and high levels of nursing care can cost, at today's prices, $80,000 to $120,000 per year. Homeownership can provide some more options to make retirement funding more workable. If a retiree pays off a home mortgage during the working years, that lessens the drop in spendable income from relying on just Social Security income compared to years when they worked and made mortgage payments. The equity in the home could be tapped by borrowing against it to provide income, or the home could be sold to raise money to live on, and the retiree could pay rent. Some retirees who worked in high cost housing markets find that they can sell their homes and replace it for a lower cost in a lower cost area and use a portion of the sale proceeds to add to their savings.
Hmm. Because I have an HR background, I feel compelled to make that point. We've been talking about Social Security. Yes, we mentioned that they might have a reduction, but in the HR world, we also discussed that at some point we might not even have Social Security. So when you do your planning, you also want to have to account to that, especially if you're young in the next like 50 years to 100 years when you are getting ready to retire. Are we gonna still gonna have Social Security? And if we don't have Social Security, how would you plan for that? What would be the game plan for you?
First of all, my opinion is no one should be planning for Social Security to go away. We are too committed to it. All it takes is matching revenues coming in to expenses going out. And unless there's nobody working anymore to provide contributions to Social Security, there should be some program. Politicians are deathly afraid of cutting Social Security benefits because they know the voters will punish them at the ballot box for doing that. Also, there's some relatively simple fixes for the Social Security funding um, mismatch at this particular point in history. All they would have to do is increase the limit of where people stop having to pay into Social Security because they make a lot of money. And in fact, if they remove the limit entirely, some experts think they could solve the problem completely if they do it sooner rather than later. But it's very difficult because no politicians really want to raise taxes nor cut
Mm-hmm.
benefits. And so we go year after year kicking the can down the road, and no one has solved this problem because it takes some political courage to do that. But still, unless people are going to be working, they're going to be contributing to the system. So right now, I would say if someone wants to be conservative, you could plan for the benefits dropping 20% in 2035, and that probably matches what experts say we're on track to do, where the system would be back in balance. There's just too many promises that have been made to too many people who contributed too much money to walk away from the system and stop doing Social Security, in my opinion.
Mm. That's a good point, but also like being part of the people already complaining about high tax brackets, are they gonna be willing to pay more taxing on top of what they're already paying? But that's a discussion for another day.
Well, and another point is historically, we're at relatively low income tax rates. We've had steady drops in the highest income tax rates since the 1970s. So we're not at a high historic point for tax collections. But yes, politicians don't want to do either. They don't want to raise taxes for Social Security funding, and they don't want to reduce benefits because both of them will be unpopular with large numbers of people.
Okay.
But at
Yeah,
some point, they will have to do something, or they'll have to cut benefits by over 20%
drastically.
is what the expectation is.
Okay. So, is there a way to find out what my Social Security benefit payments will be?
Oh, yes, there's actually sites. The Social Security Administration does have your site waiting for you to look at by going to ssa.gov and creating your online account so that you can see what your benefits are likely to be when claiming it at various ages.
Mm.
Your actual benefit will be calculated based on your 35 highest earning years, which can vary, of course, depending on what your future holds. Also, we don't know what politicians would do to the rules and tax rates to compensate for the program's underfunding. Nevertheless, it's built into the AARP calculator, and of course, you that's a standard calculation, and you can see a more specific calculation for your Social Security component by looking at your own account. It's also a good idea to check your earnings history and make sure Social Security has it correctly, because sometimes there are various kinds of mix-ups that could happen, or employers failing to report and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And also something that came up for me is also it's also important for you to check to make sure that your identity is not compromised, no one is using your information, and to check just for the accuracy, making sure that all the numbers are corrected and stuff. Because with what's going on, we have an increase in identity theft. You might not be aware of it, and it's a good, I will say, it's a good idea to check to make sure that you're not a victim. And if you find out that you are a victim, looking for ways of how you can reestablish that identity and reclaim what is yours without impacting your future.
Great point. Some people are even finding Social Security numbers and claiming tax refunds from the IRS as a scam, and that can cause problems for people to get that fixed as well. So Social Security is another place where that can come into play.
Yeah. If I need to replace a necessary part of my income from savings, how do I do that?
A simple technique is to assume you will begin retirement withdrawing funds at the rate of 4% per year of the amount you saved, and then increase that with inflation. That means you need savings of 25 times the income you want from that leg of the stool. Relating that to your total pre-retirement income, you will need savings of around 10 to 12 years of that income to retire at 65 to finish replacing your income after Social Security. Note that Social Security percentage can vary quite a bit depending on the age that you claim and how much you earn. So you may need to get more than 40% from savings, and should look at your Social Security account information and try calculators on your specific situation. Note that on the AARP calculator, I assumed a 6% investment return in retirement, which the calculator then selects a 4.7% initial withdrawal rate. We will talk about investments and returns in later episodes, but your required monthly retirement savings grow dramatically if you don't seek higher returns instead of investing too conservatively. And that's both before retirement and in retirement.
How much in retirement savings should we have at different ages?
Well, Fidelity does provide a history to show as an example for getting to the final goal of your 80% of pre-retirement income. And so with their assumptions, then they're suggesting that people save 10 to 15% of their income along the way, including employer contributions. And these are the results that you would be measuring to see if you're on track. At age 30, then you would want to have 1 year of income saved. So of course, that would be hard if you didn't start before age 30. So hopefully you
Mm,
start early. By age 40, then you would want 3 years of income saved. By age 50, then you'd want 6 years of income saved. By age 60, then 8 years of income saved. And so then by retirement, 10 to 12 years of income saved.
mm.
Now, of course, meanwhile, your earnings are changing with inflation. And of course, life happens. So you may have children to support at different parts of your life. Your income may go up faster at some stages than at others. So this is obviously a very a simplified example, and that's why it's important to look at this periodically to see how you compare with these assumptions. The average Social Security benefit in 2024 is only $22,884 per retiree.
Mm,
That will surprise many people.
yeah.
For a married couple, you could have two benefits until one person passes. Then the survivor has only the larger one to live on. The maximum benefit in 2024, if you consistently exceeded the Social Security income limits and waited to claim until age 70, is 58,476
Mm,
for someone who's 70 years old today. Saving for retirement is critical to avoiding a large drop in spending and potentially becoming a financial burden to your loved ones. We're going to talk about how to save and invest to build wealth in later episodes. We will also cover managing debt and reducing it to free up money for achieving your goals.
okay, wonderful. So we started with financial freedom, what it is, and gave you like the whole, so you have an understanding. Now, today we discuss the game plan, right? How can you set goals, what you need to look for? But for you to set those goals, you need to, again, know where you are. So, did you do the homework that was given last on the first episode? And then once you know where you are, where you want to be, then you can set those goals. But you need to understand what is actually your current location, what is your current situation, right? So that you can decide what you want to be in the future. That being said, now we will discuss the homework for this section.
Well, the first thing to do is to write down your first pass at an emergency savings goal. Remember, we talked about 3 to 6 months. So now estimate how much will you contribute each month, and that'll determine when you will have enough to meet your goal. You should revisit this after other episodes of our podcast that will discuss budgeting, investing, and dealing with debt. But doing this first one is a good start. Next, open your Social Security account online and write down your estimated benefits for ages 62, 67, and 70. Also, check your earnings history for accuracy. And then third, write down your first pass at a retirement goal. You can use the AARP calculator we've discussed and determine how much you need to contribute each month. You're going to want to revisit this goal after other episodes in the podcast to see where you stand and how to fund other goals. If you do these three things, then you'll have a very good start on two very important goals that many people neglect.
Thank you, Mark. And I also wanted to mention as a disclaimer that we are giving the information for your knowledge and for you to adapt it to your current situation, but we are not giving you any guarantees. And for you to see to experience change or to even have financial freedom, it's important for you to do the homework, not just listen to what we are saying. It's important that you get your skin in the game, do the homework, and listen to the entire series because we are going through different levels. We're starting with the basic, the root, the core, so that you have a better understanding of what is financial freedom, what it will look like, so you can come up and define what it will be for you. Then we move to setting your game plan? How can you achieve the financial freedom that you aspire to? And we go through different steps to walk you through the different, how would I say, the different steps that will be required for you to achieve that desired freedom that you are looking for. But you won't be able to achieve that if you are not willing to do the homework. We can come up with a different name, but it's still gonna be homework. You still have to do something. You still have to go through your finances. You still have to set up your goals. You still have to understand what is your current financial situation. You have to dare to declare what you want your financial situation to be if you're not happy where you're standing. And let's say you are happy where you're standing, but maybe there's always room for improvement. How can you improve? You just have to do the work. And we are here to support you, to hold your hands on that journey and giving you the basics. But play around with the information, do additional research for yourself, and learn as well. And revisit it on a yearly basis or even more than that. If you can do it twice a year, every 6 months, go revisit, and especially if your situation is volatile or if you have a lot of changes, how you can readjust. And one thing that I will say is, if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have much or you're not even making much, it's okay. Start where you are. You don't have to start big. You just have to start. If you're in a situation where you can only start with setting your goals, you know what is your current situation, and you have the clarity of where you want to go, and that's all you can do now because you don't have any income. But how can you do to start getting income? And I know it might be difficult for you if you're in a situation that is domestic violence or anything like that, but what can you do to seek help? What can you do to shift that um situation? And if you're in a situation where you are just starting or you're not making much, you don't have to save $1,000. Maybe you just have to start by saving $5 a week. That's all you can save, but still start saving. And don't start saving as that, oh, I'm gonna do all of my expenses, right? And then for my expenses, whatever is left, that's what I will save. No, you want to go, I'm going to save. I know that I can save $5 on a weekly basis. So I'm going to start with saving $5. So you remove the 5 and then you put it in an account where you have no access to it. And then you would deal with your budgeting or your expenses. And if you do it for 3 months and you say that you're comfortable, then maybe for the next 3 months, you can start and bump it up to $10 a week. Just to say that you don't have to start big, you just want to start somewhere. You want to know where you are and where you want to be, and you want to have steps or what you can do to get from location A to location B. And Mark, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, thanks for your additional insights here. I think folks can get an initial start on goal setting and get some emergency savings and retirement goal planning started. And I'm sure they'll want to come back and look at that again after our other podcast episodes where we will discuss the budgeting and investing and saving that all goes into creating wealth.
No, I'm excited. So thank you very much, Mark. And I will see you again on our next episode. Have a great day, night, or whatever time it is on your end. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could share it, leave a review, and rate it. It means so much and it helps spread this message further.